What's up, everybody? Welcome to PPR podcast number 199. As always, I'm Chase Isidoro, and as always, I'm joined by Maddie Worley. Maddie, finally playoff time.
The most exciting time of the season. It's a crazy place to be right now. There's a lot of reactions, a lot of feelings with the new way of seeding and everything like that. So we have a ton to talk about today.
Absolutely. I think we have to discuss the brackets. You know, it's not just what's going on Twitter. It's what we've talked about with coaches and different players and how it all kind of shaked out. Nobody really knew kind of the whole way down how this was going to look. And now that it's there, I don't know. I think my main reaction from it is I really don't believe there is a perfect system. You know, everything's going to have some sort of faults. And then so I guess it's more of what's kind of like the best one that's not going to have the worst outcomes as the bad sides.
The lesser evil, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The lesser evil. I think we do have that. I know there's arguments for certain ways, whether you want to go by how big the schools are or the last way we had where it was a promotion relegation kind of system. I feel like those were all fine. But I feel like this way, you know, I think we are getting closer in even outcomes as far as the teams that we want to see play. I do think there are some issues with the bracket itself, and we've talked about this plenty of times off air where, you know, not to call out specific teams, but I feel like they have to be used as examples. And really, we're kind of stuff that we wanted to see when it first got proposed was, okay, well, you know, theoretically, a team goes 0-10 and they're technically like a D1, D2 team. Are they D3? Are they D4? And they were like, well, let's see how it all shakes out with their strength of schedule. And that's what we kind of have. When you look at a team like St. Augustine, hasn't won a game all season. And now they're in the D3 playoffs, and then they're hosting a game as well. Or you look at someone like Ramona, who, you know, got up to D1 last year, and now they're in D4 and they have a bye. I don't know how I necessarily feel about that.
We've talked about this before. I think from an athletic standpoint and as an athlete, what you're always told is you want to win. That is kind of the ultimate goal, is to win. It's hard to see that wins maybe aren't celebrated or appreciated as they should be with this system, and losses might really not matter that bad if you're playing tough teams. So that's the biggest thing I struggle with, and I know everyone has opinions. Should there be a minimum win that they need to make, similar to college football with being like bowl eligible? I don't know if that's the way to go, because then you have scheduling problems with, we're going to schedule 3 easy teams to hit our quota and then play everyone super hard the rest of the year.
And then on the other side of that is if, you know, let's say that theory of like, all right, well, we need 3 wins, right? And a team like Cathedral, I can't remember what Cathedral's record was last year, but it was a down year. I don't know if they were 4-6. So they would have just just barely crossed that threshold, but they're playing all the tough teams, you know? So then does that mix it up to where now a team is like, all right, I'm going to schedule these 3 easier opponents. You know, it might hurt me a little bit in strength of schedule wise, but ultimately I know I'll get those 3 wins and I can schedule the hardest guys imaginable, and it doesn't matter, I'll make it. On top of that, the flip side, if you're those technically easier opponents, are you going to schedule a team like a Cathedral or a Madison or someone like that where you're like, man, I need my wins, so I'm going to schedule the guys at D5 AA, and then those guys are like, hey, I need my wins. So I feel like I'm with you though. I like the first thing that I noticed when I saw the 0-10 or 1-9 schools make it was like there needs to be some sort of like 3-win or something. Even 3's probably generous, you know, and just off that, it's like, well, if you do that, it's going to make so much scheduling problems that much harder. So where do we find this middle ground of, one, love rewarding the schedule, the strength of schedule.
Of course.
But then how do we make it now to where we are also rewarding what ultimately matters, which is Friday nights getting a win? I think it's okay because I don't know how many times we've talked about just over the years with anybody where it's like, okay, well that team was 2-10 and you know they're playing against this lower level team that's like 9-1. And the argument's always, well, yeah, if they had their schedule, they wouldn't be 2-10. They'd probably be 9-1 or maybe even 10-0. And we're getting that now. You know, those teams are going to match up against each other, and we're going to see, like, you know, they're probably a lot closer than we think. So I think we have it. I would like from CIF And ultimately, I like how they're just like, you know what, strength schedule, let the points play out, and where the chips fall, they may.
Black and white.
I want a little bit more gray area.
Yeah.
I do. I think there is room for gray area, which is ultimately going to have scrutiny, because anytime you're not going directly off of what the points are saying and you're making your own adjustments, people are going to be like, well, I should be a higher seed because my points. But I want the gray area. You know, if they look at a situation where, you know, not to harp on St. Augustine because they don't deserve, you know, just because they're 0-10, there's other ones that in there as well. But like, they're hosting a game. It should be a situation where if they're, you know, if they're 0-10, yeah, you're in the playoff. This is where you fell. You fell down to D3. You're in because of your strength of schedule, but you don't get to host first round.
Right.
First round, you're on the road. And then that would give the opportunity for a lower level team who's in D3 to host. You know, I know Eastlake has a better record, but an example would be like the Eastlake Army-Navy matchup. Army-Navy's had a great year. If this was a situation where, I know Eastlake has 4 wins now, but if it was like Saints or something where they were an 0-10, then you give it to the low level guy and they get the home game and they get to host this big school with, you know, technically they'd still kind of be the underdog even though that team doesn't have a win. I want that. I want CIF to look at it, and when they throw it in there, they go, all right, here's the gray area we can kind of mix with, because, and no disrespect to Ramona too, but like they have 1 win, they shouldn't have a bye. I love the fact that Mira Mesa is down there because they had a bad season and they're playing week 1. You know, when you have only 1 win on the season, I don't care what your strength of schedule was. That should be somewhere where we don't have the set, you need 3 wins, because then people will schedule for those 3 wins. But you have it where CIF can look at it and go, you know what? They should play the first week. They'll be in that division, and you know, points-wise, they should be one of the 4 spots. But we're just going to make them 5th seed, and they play the first week. Or you know, if there's someone else that deserves the spot, that's where I think it is. The other biggest problem, and I'll toss this to you, is, you know, it's hard to tell a coach not to lose games.
Yeah. That's what
and this is where I think the biggest argument for the issue, I don't have a solution, and I don't think there is one. If you're sitting at D2, and you're going to be the 12 seed in D2. But if you lose this last game of the season, you'll get a bye in D3, and you've been a D2 team all year, and you're probably going to be better than all those D3 teams. Why wouldn't you lose? That's where I want to ask you, how do you even kind of approach that? Because I really don't know.
I don't know what the right way to approach that is, but it's a problem because you can make an argument, do we sandbag these last 2 teams, get a bye week, and probably have a way better likelihood of hanging a banner, getting a CIF title? Might be a lower division, but no one's going to remember that. They're going to remember getting a title more than they're going to remember losing 2 regular season games. And I think it comes down to like honor and character, and there's not really a way to judge that. You just have to sort of hope everyone's doing their part, but there's also a strategic side of sports, and people could take advantage of that.
Absolutely, and it'd be hard for us to judge. I know all of us would be like, well, certain level of integrity. Like, and if you're a coach, why would you even do that? But at the same time, you're putting your guys in a position where they can have a memorable season, and that banner is going to fly forever.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all, but I would understand it if a coach decided to do that. So that's really the one argument I've seen where it's like, you're absolutely right. I don't know the solution for that, and I don't think there is.
No.
But as a whole, if that's the one, I think it's okay. You know, like, yeah, it might make a situation where a team will slip down. It's not ideal, but ultimately, you know, I'll let everybody on a little secret here. You know, when I do the dine and dashes, as you know, I look for, one, it's got to be good TV, so the team's got to win. So I'm not going to schedule Lincoln for the dine and dash the week they're playing Cathedral. I'm not going to schedule Cathedral for the dine and dash the week they're playing Lincoln.
No.
You know, no disrespect to the other teams, but when I'm usually scheduling a team for the Dine and Dash, or when a team hits me up, I look on their schedule and find the best one where I think, all right, I know you guys will get a win and we can have a good TV segment, right? So that's how it kind of operates. I have really no Dine and Dash people this week. I have a couple teams I've reached out to, and even then I'm stretching it. Because even with the 0-10 teams, there's situations like, you know what, they could kind of beat them.
Yeah, because they've played such harder teams up until this point.
Yeah, so we really don't know because the performances haven't been there. And the teams they're going against are kind of the high-end teams from the lower ones. So from my standpoint, and this is my own perspective, as if, does this playoff system work? I guess so. Because I'm looking at the schedule going, all right, how am I going to get a dine and dash here? when I don't know if I'm confident about any of these teams winning, and I don't want to put a kid in a situation where their high school career just ended and I've got a burrito eating it in front of their face trying to interview them, I might get punched.
Yeah, no, don't want to do that.
So like, I think if from that perspective, and that's kind of a small window perspective from my own, it has to be that the system worked because they are that close across the board. I know that there is that faults, and there's going to be some faults in it in the system, but overall, I like how it played out. Gray area where CIF can go, all right, you're 0-10, you shouldn't host a game or shouldn't have a bye. I know that'll probably be scrutiny too because they'll be intentionally going against what the points say they should be.
Right.
But that's what I think. I think that would be better than like the 3-win or 4-win minimum. I think it would, and I think we'd have a pretty good system overall.
Like you said, I think the system is showing that it works because we do have so many matchups where I'm looking and saying, I really don't know who's going to take this.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen in the playoffs. But maybe there needs to be a secondary line of judgment from CIF with things like home field advantage or win ratio. But, you know, it's the first year we're doing it, and overall, it really didn't shake out too bad.
No, I like it. I think we're going to have a really competitive playoffs. You know, we can talk about what to adjust and what should be changed and all that, but it is what it is, and we're going with it. Honestly, with the way it's laid out, I'm kind of fine with it. I think there's a lot of great games across the board, especially in these first weeks where none of them are really the greatest matchups because all those teams do have a bye, and they usually take, like, the best teams on the bye. But, like, there's still so many across the board where it's like, oh, they easily could. Anybody can win this game. There's not really any blowouts out there, and I love that. So, I mean, let's hop right into it. Open division. Lincoln will be taking on Mission Hills. La Costa Canyon will be hosting Cathedral Catholic. What was your reaction when you see this?
I wasn't surprised about where everyone was placed so much. I do think Lincoln has a pretty strong advantage over Mission Hills, but we know Mission Hills is competitive with anybody. I do think the Cathedral La Costa Canyon game is going to be really, really good. I'm looking forward to that. Those are two teams that to me seem like they will compete very well against each other. For a long time, I think we all sort of saw Cathedral as a clear 2, but now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the Cathedral La Costa Canyon matchup, we have yet to see La Costa Canyon, you know, fail against anybody. They're undefeated. This is the step up for them, and honestly, it's the perfect matchup because it's the only step up remaining. I know Lincoln's there too, but they handled Mission Hills. They handled everybody else in the avocado, and now it's like, okay, is there a gap between 2 and 3? You know, in my perspective with Cathedral being 2, is there a gap at all, or are they in there? Can they play with them? I think they can, but Cathedral poses a lot of problems when it comes to the offensive and defensive line. La Costa Canyon has a pretty solid line, and they got pretty good weapons on the outside and a good running back. You know, a great quarterback in Quinn Roth. There's a lot of linear pieces between the two. I think Cathedral has a lot of like superstar level players at the high school level, and I think they might be just a little bit too much. This might be the one that gets La Costa Canyon, but at the same time, I've been high on them since the beginning. They've been phenomenal, and it's hard to go against the team that hasn't lost yet, because we can sit here and say, oh, they've got all these kids, but ultimately, it's high school football. You still got to go out there on Friday night and play the game and win it. Yeah, great matchup there. Lincoln Mission Hills. We've talked about how much Mission Hills can take the air out of the ball and just run it down, and having a great quarterback as well. I think that can be not necessarily a problem for Lincoln, because I'm fully convinced this Lincoln team is incredible. You know, they are built different, but like you know, there's always that recipe for success where that's one that can cause some disruptors, where you can run the ball and it can drain the clock, and then you force Lincoln to kind of make no mistakes, and so, you know, 2 punts can kind of make it so, you know, Mission Hills and Lincoln are in the third quarter and it's a close game, and then it's anybody's ball game. That's kind of the recipe for success, I guess, if you want to get in the game. But I think Lincoln, I think they've shown time and time again that they are a different level. And I mean, they're on a mission. Their defense has been lights out. And if we want to talk about with Cathedral, we saw what they did to Cathedral. We saw what they did to a lot of teams across the county and outside the county. You know, I think Lincoln will go to the Open Division Championship game, and ultimately, you know, it will be right that it'll either be La Costa Canyon or Cathedral, because one, I think Cathedral, in my opinion, is the closest to Lincoln, but if LCC takes them down, they would be undefeated, and they took down this gnarly Cathedral team. I mean, it's working out the best way. And if Mission Hills takes it down, it's not like Mission Hills has done anything wrong. They lost to Granite Hills and LCC. That's it. So, you know, they've done their job as well. I think the 4 we got in the Open are the correct 4. I know there's probably some head-to-head argument when you talk about, well, Granite beat them, maybe Granite should have been in there. Yeah. But I think either way it kind of scrubs out. It is kind of the perfect way it came out for the Open.
Yeah, I really like the way the Open shook out. Now we got to talk about D1. The first thing my initial viewing told me was that there was a lot of different teams in D1 than maybe what I was used to. We see Granite dropping from Open. They won the Open last year. A lot of people kind of just assumed they would be in the Open again, but now they're in D1 and they're actually the 3 seed.
Yeah.
However, I think they have a pretty strong advantage coming into this, and I'm sticking with I think Granite could come out on top for the Division 1.
You know, when it comes to Granite Hills, there's been some problems defensively where one, defense is phenomenal for them, don't get me wrong, but then there's times where they can give up a lot of points in chunk. Like we saw with Grossmont this last week.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Granite put up 90. You know,
a lot of points there.
If you give up 46, it helps if you put up 90. But also, we saw it with Cathedral, where Cathedral, it was close for like half a second, and then they got on them quickly, and it was like, whoa, what just happened? You know, so outside of that, I think Granite is probably a favorite for me, but I also like all the teams that got buys. They feel like they were the ones that should get buys with San Marcos in there and Carlsbad, El Camino as well. Then there's some teams, what I like about this playoff system is that, like, it is open. The fact Santa Fe Christian is in D1.
Yeah, that was the first one to me. I'm like,
I'll tell you what, don't sleep on them.
No.
I got to go shoot the game in the pouring monsoon rain that happened at La Jolla. I'm still freezing cold. My socks, I feel like they're still wet, even though they're not. But that game was incredible, them against Bishops. And they did a great job. They did a great job of extending the field and running the ball. Santa Fe Christian's the real deal. You know, hard game for them coming up against Mount Miguel. We'll get into that a little bit. But that's probably the one I'm looking at first for this first week is that Santa Fe Christian Mount Miguel game. But really across the board, there's a lot of great teams in this D1 bracket, and it's honestly how it probably should have been.
Yeah, I really like the way it shook out. Like we said, that kind of shows the new system and how people are going to fall into place, the D1 bracket. I think it's going to be really exciting to watch. Like you said, I'm looking forward to that Santa Fe Christian Mount Miguel game because Mount Miguel's proven themselves to be growing into one of the top teams in the county. This is showing that. You're in D1 now, jumping from Division 4 champs last year, which, to be honest, I was at that game. It looked a little easy for them to now be in the Division 1. That's a big deal. And then you've got teams like Santa Fe Christian, a school of, 400 kids up here with the big guys. It's pretty cool.
Only day games at Santa Fe Christian, right? Like they're jumping up to here. It'd be massive for them if they got the upset against Mount Miguel. But I do think this is time where, the process has been greatly accelerated for Mount Miguel, going from D4 to D1. I don't care who they got on their team. That's a huge jump for any program.
Oh, yeah.
As much as we want to talk about that for Santa Fe Christian, it goes the same for them. So this is a big, big game for both those sides. Another one I'm looking at too is Brawley RB. Brawley, a team that's been phenomenal this whole season, and RB also a team that's been great. That will be a great matchup as well. We'll get into D2 now. The D2 one, I also love how it shaked out, and this is kind of like how it trickles down is now the teams that we've been so used to always being in D1, the modern days, the Helix, the Madisons, they're now D2 because they necessarily didn't have that great year, but they're very capable, and it makes D2 so much stronger.
Oh, for sure.
Now these guys aren't getting knocked out first or second round of the D1 playoffs. They're now the top heads of D2. Feels like all of our divisions are getting stronger. It might be a little bit, maybe you want to say lopsided for the rest of the guys who are technically D2, but I guess all that's kind of gone now. It's wherever it shakes out. I like the way that has kind of played out where not necessarily had the greatest year, but you're still recognized as near the top dogs, and these other teams have a chance to beat you, but it'll also shake out to where we can have a great D2 championship game. The one I'm looking at, Valley Center at Point Loma. Valley Center almost getting the job done against Oceanside.
Really close.
That will be a good one. We'll talk about that game in a little bit, but that's the one that kind of stands out for me as well.
Yeah, I think the D2 one's interesting because you have the teams, like you said, that you expect to see in D1 every year, like a Helix. Maybe didn't have a winning season, but is still a great program, a well-coached program, and has kids with talent, even though it might be a building year. I think that's going to show how our new system works if a team like Helix makes it further in that Division 2. And then you have some smaller schools like Christian, but you also have a big school like University City, who I think has a chance to do really well in this division.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then that's kind of where the whole, pushing those guys up to D1 like the Santa Fe Christians, instead of just going, well, it's Helix, it's still Madison, it's still all these guys. They deserve to be there because we know how big the program is. We're rewarding those guys who did have a pretty good schedule, and ultimately they made it in as the 12 seed. I'm sure Santa Fe Christian would probably like to be in D2 because they probably have a better shot. And I'm not counting the Eagles out yet. I was very impressed on Saturday night, but I think it's a good thing for where our sport is going that they are placed where they should be based on how well they did. And ultimately, I like that. Let's go on to D3. La Jolla Country Day at Saints. Obviously, we've talked about this with an 0-10 team hosting a playoff round. I think this is a good spot for Saints because we've seen them be somewhat competitive at times. Sometimes it's been too much the guys they're going against. Now it all starts over. You're going against guys, there's no excuses anymore. You're going against guys that are technically near your level as far as rating and as far as play. And I think La Jolla Country Day is a good game for that. Another one I like in this whole bracket is San Diego. I think San Diego has been a great team all year, but also do not sleep on Holtville. Holtville has been unbelievable all year. They might ultimately be the toughest team to beat out of this division. Yeah,
I had a similar reaction to D3. I'm looking at San Diego. They haven't really had any huge losses. Most of their games have been within 1 or 2 scores. They're competitive with everybody. But like you said, shout out to these desert teams. Yeah. So many of them have been doing really well this season. So they have a really good chance in the Division 3 bracket. But I think that is one where it looks like it's going to be really competitive. There's a lot of nice pairings in those games.
Absolutely. And I think a similar thing we'll see from the D3 and D4, and this might be something that happens every year, is those teams that have really, really strong schedules and are known programs but have a really bad year, where you're talking about an 0-10 Saints. Now we go on to D4, 1-9 Ramona with a bye. That's something where I would like to see adjusted. But if you're also being technical, you're going all the way down to D4 from D1, well, they're at D1 last year. So that is one where it's like, okay, we'll put you in there. I would like to see them play week 1 because they did go 1-9. Yeah. But, regardless, you have Mira Mesa, kind of the same boat as well. They are playing week 1. But that's also good because they have had that down year, and maybe they are more competitive against these teams. I will say this, though. Even though they gave up 90, do not sleep on Grossmont.
46 to the 90.
Zach Benitez was second all-time on the touchdown record from that week. He threw 8 touchdowns. Obviously, Granite put up 90 points. That is the new record. 136 combined is also the record. He was not the best player on the night, in my opinion. And I love Zach. It was Thomas Donovan. He made throws for Grossmont that night that was unbelievable. Also, his wide receivers as well. All of them played great. Obviously, got to figure out the defense. That's not gonna go well if you're giving up that many points. But I'm fully believing that. Sometimes you look at these stats and you're like, okay, they throw it every single time. That's why they have so many stats. No, he was making legitimately great throws that needed to be made. It wasn't in a situation where they were trying to run up the score, and they were hanging in there because of that. And they were down early in that game. Do not sleep on Grossmont. Defense needs to get figured out, sure, but that offense is lethal. And I think they have a really good shot. So does El Cap. El Cap's been on a roll of late. A great game against Elkhorn Valley that they put up. I think El Cap is catching the right stride right now, where those are the kind of the 2 that I'm looking at, on top of the ones that are the 1-9s and that have had the bad years like Mira Mesa, because technically it's a bigger program who should be able to play better against these teams. So those are kind of the ones I identify from there.
Yeah, I was looking at El Cap too. They're running really hot right now, undefeated in league play. They haven't lost a game since early September. That's the kind of team where going into the postseason, they have all this momentum. That's hard to stack up against.
Absolutely. Then we go over to D5. Hoover stands out as the one that's kind of the big one for me. I love the offense they have there, obviously with Sir Autry, but Christian Noriega has been great. He's got a great pairing of wide receivers as well. Another one that kind of bothers me a little bit is a Monta Vista team that has been so bad over the last couple of years. They are 5-5 now. They've actually had a pretty solid season. They are not hosting the game. 0-10 Fallbrook is hosting the game. I know I don't want to harp on this because I've said it probably 7 times now, but that's one where it's like, reward Monta Vista. They should be rewarded for, they should host that one and make Fallbrook kind of earn it. But the way it is, they get a shot, which I love to see. This Monta Vista team has been a really solid team. I can't wait to see them play. But the one that really does stand out from here is Hoover. I think they have probably the best shot to go on and win this title.
Yeah, I agree. Hoover, I think, has a great chance. They've played some teams that, in my opinion, are a little bit higher level than Division 5. So I think with the talent they have and the competitive teams they've faced already that makes them really strong headed into this. But like you said, D5 is one of those where it's hard to see these winless teams hosting games. That's something I'm not a huge fan of for all these brackets, but for the most part, I think we have some good games.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Even with the ones that are winless, I still think they're going to be great games.
Yeah.
I am nowhere near saying they don't deserve to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Reward them for scheduling really tough teams, and ultimately, if they do get some wins, I would love to see it. But I think there should be a little bit of, CIF looks at it and goes, okay, we'll just swap you guys. We'll still stay in the same bracket. I know the math won't work because it'll be like a 5 and a 12 switching.
Yeah.
I don't want to cause too many headaches with my proposed deal where you got to do the math. Just keep them there. If they're supposed to be a 5, just swap them to a 12 so they'd still come out of the same spot. Just make them earn it by going on the road compared to a team like Monte Vista who's 5 and 5 and, in my opinion, should be hosting a game. That would kind of be my only preference. Now we get to D5 AA. Basically all the Christian schools. We got Victory Christian, we got Tri-City Christian, Coastal Academy, but also Maranatha Christian. Maranatha and Tri-City are the ones that stand out to me. Also, Calipatria is great as well.
Yeah.
It should be interesting. D5AA always puts on some pretty good performances because they always seem to be so close to each other when it comes to the quality of team.
Yeah, looking at D5, like you said, they all seem really, really close. Similar schools, similar programs, honestly similar schedules as you look at them. Like, what is it? I believe it's the Coastal Academy and O'Farrell. They're playing each other back to back.
Yeah.
So that's weird. That doesn't usually happen,
Yeah.
but that makes it for a fun playoff. You see each other again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we might as well get into the games for next week as we have the games of the week. We start off with the game of the week, 6-4 Del Norte at 7-3 Oceanside. This is the 8-9 matchup from D1. What kind of stands out to you when you see this matchup?
Man, I like the 8 and 9 matchups. I think that's fun seeing that they're so close to each other. I almost feel like I wish I could see them next week and have them play different teams this week just because I think it's going to be a really good game. Del Norte did come off a loss, but it was to San Marcos.
Yeah, close one too.
It was close. They really held their own. There's a good connection between Anthony Taylor and Diesel Taylor. They're 6-4, but those losses are to LCC, Carlsbad, RB, San Marcos. Not bad losses, like you said, probably boosting the strength of schedule for them. And then Oceanside looked really strong last week, taking the win in the North County game of the week. They've had a pretty good year so far, undefeated in league play, led by senior quarterback Joseph Vinup. He's been great for them. But they also have a couple freshmen who are moving the ball pretty well. They look good on both offense and defense. I think this is going to be a really, really nice matchup.
Yeah, I like the momentum Oceanside is keeping, especially because that Valley Center team has been very tough, very slept on, and they were down. Good for them to come back. Vinup is a very good quarterback. As long as he limits turnovers, I think they have a very good shot at winning this game. It's not necessarily a young core. As far as Oceanside, they're kind of stacked across, and it's very staggered with the different classes. But the freshmen, Nike Latule, SJ Pumele, Exodus Talele, also just great names across the board.
Yes.
I'm sure Paul will slip up on one of those when it comes to reading the highlights. But those will be really, really good players for them to build off of, and they're not asking them to do too much yet. I know with Latule, they're asking a lot of him running the ball right now, but he's been phenomenal. So they're integrating them in great ways. On top of that, they've shown that they have a really good defense at Oceanside. Love what they're building, and this is kind of one of those where it is a good matchup because we saw how great Del Norte was last year. They still have remnants of that this year, and then Oceanside being the team on the rise. Love this for the game of the week. Let's get on to the South Bay game of the week. 8-2 Army Navy at 4-6 Eastlake. The 5-12 matchup from D3. Army Navy's Nehemiah Brunson Jr. does everything for them. He's taking over a little bit as quarterback, a little bit wide receiver, a little bit running the ball, great on defense. Really one of these standout players in this county that kind of has been slept on a lot when it comes to, because they are Army Navy, because they are kind of lower ranked. It's good to see them get up to the D3 level because they've had that success. And taking on an Eastlake team where, we've seen Eastlake kind of, fall off the radar a bit these last couple of years, but they've been on a roll. 3 straight wins. William Schmitz, 431 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Even ran for 90 and 2 touchdowns against Mater Dei before that as well. Eastlake's on a good little roll going into the playoffs. They're getting a tough Army Navy team, but one that as a program program they should beat. This is a really good one for South Bay Game of the Week, and really good one for Eastlake to kind of show that, okay, we can be competitive at the D3 level, and we can show that we can, potentially go on and win a D3 title, which I kind of think is where Eastlake kind of is right now. I don't think they've been that D1, even a D2 these last couple of years. So I do think it is a good spot for them.
Yeah, I like seeing Eastlake in the D3. I think that's where they fit right now as a program, and seeing Army-Navy step up to that level. They're a small school, but they've been doing really, really well, playing some tougher teams than maybe what they used to. And it's cool to see because, Eastlake's 10 times the size of Army-Navy. Way back in the day when it was school size, we would never get to see these two teams play against each other. So I think this is another one that really shows the new system, and I think it's a good pairing. It's going to be a close game, and I'm not looking at this saying it's going to be a blowout either way.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's get on to the city game of the week. 7-3 Valley Center at 5-5 Point Loma. This is a really good one. I've been high on this Valley Center team, mainly on Dan Staley. 113 total tackles, fourth in the county, 33 tackles for loss. Number one by a mile. I think next is 18. 33 TFLs is insane. 16 of those are sacks. So it's not like it's all just sacks. Sack 16, also number one in the county. He does it as a linebacker and also has 10 rushing touchdowns for them. Staley's a monster. And if you watch his tape, just one of those kind of crazy people that runs head first at the ball. Like, you can see the extra step he takes and then it explodes. It's like, that's the exact guy you want at linebacker. He's a great player and really does so much for Valley Center. But taking on a Point Loma team that's been pretty tough over these last couple of weeks. I know there's been some opponents they play that's been a little bit too much for them, like Cathedral, but they also win against La Jolla and got a great win against them. I know La Jolla's a little banged up right now, but Romeo Carter, great two-way player for the Pointers, 900 receiving yards. He's great defensively. This is going to be a really tough one in the 5-12 matchup from D2.
Yeah, this is a nice matchup. Like you said, Valley Center has been a really aggressive team with Dan Staley on both sides of the ball, just absolutely killing it. Another great player for them is Bear Morales. He's looking good on both sides. I didn't really pay attention to this team too much until about 2-3 weeks ago, and that was definitely a mistake. They're pretty good, and this is going to be a great opponent for Point Loma, who's faced the top competition, the top teams in the county, which they did lose to. However, when you go from that to now being in D2, where I think is a good fit for them, it makes them that much more competitive, and this is going to be a great game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we keep it rolling with the North County game of the week. 9-1 Scripps Ranch at 4-6 Torrey Pines. The 6-11 matchup from D1. I don't know if this is necessarily one where I'd go, because Scripps Ranch is 9-1, they should host over Torrey. I think Torrey being 4-6, they lost to avocado teams and every single game was close. I'm okay with this one being like the math, with the strength of schedule. And that's nothing against Scripps Ranch because we've seen how great they've been, and they lost on a 2-point conversion. They could have very well been undefeated. So this is not necessarily one like the others where I'm like, oh, they're 4-6, they shouldn't host a game. I kind of disagree. I'm okay with the math on this one. Ideally, I'd like Scripps Ranch to be able to host a game because they are 9-1. But, I think Torrey, the schedule they went through and who they had to play and how close they played those teams, I'm okay with it. But Scripps Ranch, obviously, Ryan Stauder, he's been great all year. He's up for the fan vote as well. Torrey Pines kind of needs a little bounce back because we've said every single week it's been a close game that they've played. This one wasn't a close game in the surfboard, but also Ryder Young has been a standout player at running back for them. I think they lean on him and they lean on their defense. And I think that's one where, I don't know, Scripps Ranch has been really good at running the ball with Stauder in there. So I would lean towards Scripps Ranch to pull it out, but we've seen it all year from Torrey. They're going to play a close game and they're going to be well coached to be able to approach it.
Yeah, like you said, Torrey's record doesn't show the whole team. We've said it week after week. They're 4-6 in the regular season, but their losses have all been close and have all been to the best teams around town. Like, the Avocado League is very tough, and they've hung in there week after week. I think they make every team work for their win, and it's going to be no different with Scripps Ranch. Like you said, Scripps Ranch could have a little bit of an upper hand just because of how dominant, really, they've been this season, but they haven't quite played as difficult of teams until this point. They're 9-1. I think that loss definitely left them with a sour taste in their mouth, especially with it being so close. They were a 2-point conversion away from being 10-0. That's hard.
I still love the call, though. I always say I love the call.
I like 2-point conversion.
Going for 2 at the end to win it, I'm still all aboard on it, especially against a team like Mount Miguel that has so many great players. It's a bad way to go, but at least you got the loss out there and you went down in a good fashion. What do we have now for East County game of the week?
Now we've got Santa Fe Christian at Mount Miguel. 2 teams that we were just talking about are very cool to see in the Division 1. Mount Miguel making the huge jump, jumping 3 divisions. That's almost unheard of. And Santa Fe Christian moving up as well. I think it's interesting. Santa Fe is a smaller school. Mount Miguel is a school on the rise. It's going to be a very good game. Mount Miguel, we know they have a ton of star power, like you just mentioned in that game against Scripps Ranch. I mean, you see Brandon Arrington, so fast, fastest guy in the state. You're not going to stop him if he gets on the run. Like, it's just not going to happen unless someone comes out of the woodworks from Santa Fe and says, I'm actually now the fastest guy. That's not going to happen. So it's going to be difficult for them. But I still think it's going to be competitive.
Yeah. From what I saw from Santa Fe Christian, they have a lot of capabilities where they can run the ball. I like how they line up with the 3 running backs. That adds a lot of confusion, especially when it comes to running it. I think it'll be probably a little bit difficult. I think as long as Mount Miguel plays clean, as long as they have a clean game and they're crisp on like 3 or 4 of their drives to start it, I think they can probably be a little bit too much for Santa Fe Christian to the point where Santa Fe Christian is now trailing by 2 touchdowns, and that might be a little bit too much against Mount Miguel. However, I do think Santa Fe Christian has a lot of capabilities when it comes to running it and being able to hang with it with Mount Miguel. It wouldn't shock me to see the gap in quality. It wouldn't shock me to see that with the players that Mount Miguel has. But do not sleep on the Eagles. I get it. There was a lot of it was raining. Bishops fumbled the ball twice. Bishops could have easily won that game, sure. But Santa Fe Christian did what they had to do to put themselves in that game to win it. It might be a little bit too much for them to make the leap to D1, but it wouldn't shock me if they put up a good fight.
I think it's interesting also having these 2 teams as our featured East County game because they're 2 teams that are breaking into D1.
Yeah.
When I looked at that bracket, they're 2 teams that almost feel like the outliers. So like you said, there might even be a gap in quality or ability between these 2 teams. But I think that's really going to show us what the D1 is going to look like.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I'm just finally glad it is playoff time.
Yeah.
It's been a great regular season, though. I mean, I think the way the teams have scheduled because of the new system, I do think we've had some pretty great weeks. But, I mean, I think this might be one of the best weeks in PPR just from across the board, the level and quality of games. I don't expect many blowouts.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll all find that out on Friday night. We'll see you then.
See you Friday.